This is The Roadmap with Ted Jenkin.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here in America's Small Business Network. I'm Ted Jenkin, your host, bringing to you every week some of the brightest and best CEOs, business owners, and entrepreneurs in and around the United States. We talk about starting businesses, growing businesses, and maybe one day you too can exit stage left, get a big valuation. They're out there today. I'm excited today to interview a longtime entrepreneur and friend, Mike Gill. He's one of the owners of Andy Lewis Hobson Heating and Air, but he has been in and around this business for a long time. And Mike, I want to just help people understand how you even got into this industry, you know, because people don't get out of college today. A lot of them don't start in this industry. How'd you get into the HVAC industry?
Well, it's a long story short. I grew up in South Florida, and my dad was a college professor.
It's hot.
Wanted me to go to college, so I took a year and went to Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, for a year. They did not invite me back, so I had to get home.
After the year, they said you're out.
They said, hey, it was a nice try, but probably college isn't for you. So I went back home, showed up at Dad's doorstep, and he said, if you're going to be here, you got to find a job. So I went in and started looking around, got into the construction industry. Then I got married very quickly and young at 20. And
wow.
So I decided I've got to do something that's going to be able to provide for my family a little differently. So I got in. A friend of mine who worked at Sears and Roebuck, so I started out there wearing a brown uniform, had my name on it, drove a van, and I was an installation inspector. $10 an hour is where I started.
Nice, big money.
Yeah. So, and through the years, I kind of said, hey, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I want to continue to grow and develop and learn more everywhere I went. So I slowly but surely worked my way up through the different divisions within Sears and Roebuck. I ran sales, I was in installation. Finally, my last job at Sears was the national installation manager in Chicago, Illinois. So, and I always thought I would never work anywhere else. But as we know,
Sears forever.
Sears is no longer around.
Right.
So took a change there.
So you've been in this HVAC business for a long time, but you did spend a lot of years at Peachtree Service. And I'm wondering that there are people that are thinking, I'm just going to start a venture, right? I'm going to get into heating and air conditioning. I'm going to open a restaurant. Was there a lot of value of working as an employee for a large organization like that before you actually started your own heating and air conditioning company?
Absolutely. I mean, when you work for somebody else, you learn kind of what drives those different types of businesses. And when my time at Peachtree, there was really three things that were key to me learning so that I could go out and start my own business. And one was understanding how they built the culture there. And in Peachtree, it was a win-win-win. 3 different places. And the interesting thing is Peachtree's culture of win-win-win for the employees, the customers, and then the company was very similar to what Sears and Roebuck did 15 years earlier.
Interesting.
Okay, so I tied it back in and I said, you know what, because Sears in the 90s had a slogan that was called, make this a great place to work, shop, and invest. And I don't know whether you ever heard that.
Work, shop, and invest. Not go bankrupt.
Not go bankrupt. That wasn't on the cards. But that culture piece was really important as I started to look at starting my own business. And then always be growing. You have to be looking at, that's what they taught me at Peachtree. When I got there, they were kind of sliding backwards. We had to restart all of the growth initiatives that they had in place years ago that made them a great company to begin with.
So in the HVAC business, for a lot of people that have seen this business, I think everybody thinks blue-collar businesses are easy. I know, I own one, and they're not easy. Is the model in here basically for residential, it's part service and part installation? Are those really the 2 big parts of the model of running a heating and air conditioning company?
They are in the majority of the small startup companies, because that's where you start. You're usually a technician, or you know a technician, or you're a salesperson. So you can either do one or the other. So you're selling new installations or you're doing service work. And those are the keys. What the difference with some of the larger ones that have done really well, Peachtree being one of them, was they figured out the model around service agreements. Jackie Rainwater had built this thing up, when I took it over, there was about 13,000 agreements people under contract that we did their annual maintenance every year.
I mean, you might pay $300 a year.
$300 a year.
Changes the filters, leaves a little something on the tag, and that's
you got it. That's what you go and do. But what you're doing is you're in there when it breaks, and then when it breaks, the customer trusts you. You've been taking care of it all this time. So when they say, "Hey, well, what should I do?" So, well, you probably need to replace it. And at that point, you replace the equipment, And that's where really the margin is on the air conditioning
Right,
side
because
of
it
the
isn't,
business.
I really look at it sometimes like it's not that much different, Mike, than a dentist office. Like, you know, you go in twice a year for a checkup, they charge you a small fee. They don't make a lot of money on those checkups, but eventually, I hate to say it this way, but your teeth are gonna break, something. You got a gum problem, you need a cavity, you gotta get a crown, and that's really where the money is made. So the model does look similar that way, right? It's a few $100 a year.
Very, very similar.
Take care of the basic maintenance, but eventually there's a warranty for a while and then it's gonna break. And,
Right.
and so how do you know, I think what's interesting for the consumer is that I don't know how many manufacturers there are in the heating and air conditioning business. My guess is quite a few. How do you choose who you do business with, right? Because there's so many vendors you can. How do you choose that relationship?
So when you think about the OEMs, which are the people that manufacture the product, there's a couple of key things that I looked for because I was part of those organizations before. And one is the product brand reliability of the product. Okay, the support that you're going to get from that OEM, and then the training that they're going to offer. Because if you don't have those things as a new startup in the business, then you're going to struggle. Because when you bump into a problem or you have an issue with a piece of equipment that you sold to a homeowner, and you can't get the support or you can't get the training on how to teach your guys how to work on this, then you're going to struggle. So those are really important things that you look for whenever you're picking whether you want to go with, and I'm going to use some big names: Trane, Carrier, Bryant, Lennox. You know, all of them good manufacturers. All the products are very, very similar, but how they support it can be very different.
So it's not a bad thing. If you're dealing with an HVAC company and they only work with Lennox as an example, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. They may just have decided these are what they believe are the best products and where I get the best support for those products.
You got it.
When you were at Peachtree, before you opened your business, I think a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs that fail don't understand how to build systems and processes. Being a general manager there and doing everything that you did, what did you learn about standard operating procedures that made you think about this as you've now built successive businesses?
Well, what's interesting is that you have to, if you don't have those processes, you end up just going job to job, and you never really get ahead, and you can't scale your business. So by having some experience in those areas where the processes are laid out and they're consistent, and you do them every time the same way, you start to deliver a better product to your customer. Your employees understand what they're supposed to do every day, which is always my fear as an owner of a business, right? You wake up in the morning, what do you ask yourself every morning? Does everybody know what they're supposed to do today? And if you can fix that by having a consistent process in place and making sure that they know what they're going to do, then the delivery's better, the profitability ends up being better for the company at the end, and it becomes scalable, which is really key if you're going to ever want to sell your business.
How do you build a pricing structure in your business? And what I mean by that is that obviously since COVID, it feels like everything's gotten more expensive. And I'm sure that the cost to you on this side of the business, it's just more expensive to buy a unit. Do you finance the units with the company, or do they give you sort of a line of credit? And then how do you price it out to figure out how to make margin, but so where it's not too expensive for the customer, but you can still make a profit?
It's a great question, and we struggle with that and work on it all the time because, you know, you build the price typically based on what your costs are, right? What are your hard costs going into the business is your margin model. And then you've got, whether it's commissions or advertising expense, other expenses on the below the line kind of expenses. And at the end of the day, hopefully there's something left for the company and the owners, right?
You gotta make some money.
But those hard costs do fluctuate, especially with, you know, increases in pricing, changes in refrigeration, which we've had another change this past year, and we've got another one coming in a couple of years, trying to be more eco-friendly, more green. They keep changing this. It drives the price up because it costs more to manufacture it, costs more to buy it. So you got to build those prices right. When you look at the model that actually, what am I going out to the homeowner with from a price standpoint, you have to understand what your costs are. And if you don't understand your cost, then you'll never price it right. And you'll overprice it or you'll underprice it. So you have to know, hey, I've got to have this because this is what my overhead's going to run, and then make sure that you're margining that into the cost of the job, or you'll always be behind.
Is it the main reason that people will choose a job if they shop you and they shop 3 people? Is price the number one factor, or is it really about service or timeliness of delivery? Because my guess is if your heat breaks and it's cold, you want speed, right? You know, or vice versa. It's hot out and your air conditioning breaks, you want speed. Is the primary thing like how fast you can get the job done?
There are times. You gave a great example of one. When it's freezing outside and my heat's broken and I've got one unit in my house, I need it fixed, and I need it fixed today, either fixed or replaced. There are more and more people that have are shopping. They're looking for a better deal. They want to make sure that they're getting the right price. People on shows will tell them, hey, always go get 3 estimates, right? You've heard that forever.
3 quotes.
And then there's a very famous guy in this market that talks about that all the time. Go get your 3 quotes.
I don't trust him, by the way, so you know.
But what I think makes a big difference, especially in small business, is the relationships that we build with our customers, right?
Right.
We built our business around having the best people, giving great products, and for a great value, right? So the value proposition, do they really understand what they're buying? Yes, price is important. You have to know your market. You need to know that, hey, a 3-ton standard system is going to be around this price. There's always going to be guys cheaper. There's always going to be guys more expensive, but you need to be in the game if you want to win. And then your relationship will push you over the top, because homeowners they like to buy from people they trust and they know.
Mike, how much do logistics play a part in your business? And what I mean by that is that when I look at businesses like waste management, when I look at businesses like landscaping, geography and logistics do play into it, because you can't be driving around a city like Atlanta. You could be stuck in traffic for an hour and a half. Do you focus on a zone or zip codes, or do you draw a circle about where you do business? Because at some point, just driving, putting technicians out on the road, it just doesn't make sense?
You have to. Andy Lewis Hobson's a little bit different because we have such a large new construction base, and it's all over the city. So we kind of follow our new construction base. When I owned my own business, after I left Peachtree, I focused specifically on a zone, like you said. I said, here's the area I want to pick. I learned that business, I learned that market, what the homeowners were there, and I targeted my marketing around them, because you can be much more efficient if you're not putting 3.5 hours of windshield time on that truck every day.
What does it cost to get the whole business up and going? Because I got to imagine you could be one guy in a truck, but you've got commercial equipment you got to have. Or is it expensive to get an HVAC business up and going?
The cost of entry in HVAC is not as high as in some other industries. Because if you do, to your point, if I've got a van and I've got my tools, I can put my shingle up and I can get a little bit of credit from one of the OEMs or supply houses, and I can be up in business pretty quick, as long as I'm getting paid, but for my customers quickly, right?
Is that an issue? The issue is if you don't get paid in 30 days.
If you don't get paid, then you can't pay your bills.
How fast does a manufacturer expect you to pay, right?
Immediately.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, they want their money right away. Now you can get some terms during certain times of the year. They'll help you out with that. But when I started my business, I had $75,000 in the bank, and I said, I'm going to get started, and I was able to get credit set up. The key is you've got to be able to get some credit. So you have to be, you've got to have good credit. You've got to know what the capital it's going to take to get started with. Get your people in place, and then you got to start driving revenue.
Now, on the other side of this, you mentioned with Andy Lewis Hobson that you're doing a lot of new construction, which I guess on one hand is really good, but if for some reason the economy takes a turn, I'm not saying it's going to be the Great Recession, would that dramatically impact the business if housing just came to a standstill?
It happened in 2008, as you remember, and
right.
we were able to.
They crushed the HVAC business.
They were able to weather the storm. But you also had to scale back, right? You went from doing $20 million in new construction to doing $7 million, right? So you have less crews, less trucks, and you've got to manage everything back down. It's just the nature of the beast.
How do you choose to do residential versus commercial, or do you do both? Because they are different businesses.
They are. They're slightly different. You can go into light commercial, which will take you up to 25 tons in most areas, and you can do rooftop changeouts, you can do some maintenance on those kind of things. When you get above that and get into the larger equipment and the stuff that's it's kind of more on a large scale for plants and different products like that, then you get into a different technician, you get into different parts and pieces, you get different response times. If you get into refrigeration, people want a 4-hour response time. I'm not interested in being in a 4-hour response window. I'll be happy to come out tomorrow morning or this evening if you only have one system on an emergency basis. But with refrigeration and industry where you've got to have big equipment that has to be up and running because I'm going to lose food, then it's a different animal. So that's kind of a separate one from what I see.
The last, I feel like 5 to 10 years, we've seen a lot more extreme weather. And I don't want to say that y'all would root for bad weather, but the extremes of weather make the business more profitable, doesn't it? Like if it's extremely cold or extremely hot, does that help the business? Because a more temperate climate, people don't care as much about their cool or their heat?
it's a two-edged sword with the hot and cold weather. On one side, yes, it drives demand work for us, but it also creates a lot of flurry and a lot of activity that sometimes doesn't turn into any profitability. So we actually do a little bit better when it's steady.
Is that right?
Yeah, and when we have consistency on the calls, and we know where the guys are going, and we're not disappointing homeowners because we can't get there, because we've got so many calls coming in. So that hot and cold weather, yes, it does drive some peaks. It will help with the demand on the replacement business and some of the demand, but I like to kind of see it in the middle, where we've got enough weather to drive this consistent calls, where we can put the calls, and everybody's got calls to do today, and then we just do our job through that consistent process.
As you all scale, it seems to me that there becomes this incredibly big shortage today in all blue-collar businesses of labor. Shortage of plumbers, shortage of electricians, shortage of technicians, I feel like, in every business. How do you recruit and try to retain high-quality technicians? I got to imagine it's hard. That's a hard part of the business.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about that, and it's one of those things where as soon as you think you've got it figured out, it changes again.
It does.
And COVID changed it dramatically because wages went through the roof coming out on the backside of COVID. I think I'm at the point now, after 35 years in this industry, that you've got to always be networking. Okay, if you ask me what are the keys to doing this,
always be networking.
You got to always be networking. B, you got to hire for attitude, and you train for skill. Okay, if you can keep that in the back of your mind, because it's real easy to go, hey, this guy's really smart, I know what he's doing. But guess what? He changes jobs every 2 years because he gets tired of where he is and then he goes to the next guy.
Right.
So there's no sticking power with that guy. If I teach you the business and you learn from me and we create a relationship, then you're going to stay. And then the last thing is really to have a wage base that really works for your business and know what that market is, because people have to be able to make a living, and you've got to price your product and then teach them how to sell and do the things that are necessary to keep the business going long term.
You've been very successful in your career, and as you were saying in the beginning, you only spent a year at Ole Miss, then something happened, didn't go back.
Right.
Why do you think so many parents today have frowned on this idea of their child not going to college and getting into a really good blue-collar job? I'm talking about good-paying, high-growth job, welder, plumber, electrician. Like, these are great-paying jobs in America that have lots of growth and a shortage of people. Why do so many parents say, my kid's got to go to college and get a degree to only work at Starbucks?
It's just a stigma on the business. It's dirty jobs has highlighted it, right? These are dirty. Yeah. These are jobs. You're in addicts. You're sweating. You're doing it. There are a lot of kids that don't want to do this. They'd rather find something that's an easier path. And I think parents look at it the same way. Hey, I want you to wear the nice shirt and go to the office and
right.
and drive the nice car. And you can do all those things. I had technicians that make well over $100,000 in the business.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they're good jobs, but you got to work. You got to show up. And you got to do the work as necessary, and that's tough. And that teaching work ethic. That's what if parents would just teach work ethic, the kids would figure it out, right? Just teach them to go to work every day.
You hear that, parents at home? Teach your kids some work ethic. I like that.
Yes.
How do you think, by the way, the next 5 years, as you look at the current company, how do you scale this thing, and whether you sell it or not, how do you get it positioned to one day maybe go to market and sell the company? Because HVAC's a very hot market right now.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to, for any small business or medium-sized business, you got to have a plan. You got to write it down. You got to know what you want to accomplish, right? You got to understand where your value is as a company. So if in our industry, we talk about maintenance agreements. The guy that has the most customers in the end, I think, kind of wins. Okay, so you have to continue to build your business around that. You have to understand your cash flow and what in your balance sheet, right? Because when you go to sell your business, they're going to look at it and it's a math equation, right? And I'm talking to the math guy, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand that as a business owner, so that you can then do those things and position yourself to where when you do get ready to sell it, you're in the best position you can be for the right multipliers to be able to turn it over and then have an exit strategy. These companies today, the reason all these roll-ups are happening, one of the things that we've talked, you and I've talked about this before, why is it happening so much? Well, A, there's a lot of capital out there in the market.
Right.
And B, there's a lot of people that have businesses that don't have an exit strategy. So guys swoop in and go, hey, let me look at this, and they see an undervalued business that they can scale because they've got capital to do it. And this guy, me or whoever, hasn't been able to scale it because I didn't have either access to the capital or didn't have the plan in place to do it.
What's your number one piece of advice for startup entrepreneurs, knowing that you've been through it several times now?
There's not. I don't know that there's one thing. I mean, I just kind of walk through. Make sure you write down what you really want to do. What's your plan, and then put some timelines and put some goals out there for it. Understand what capital is really going to be involved to get it started, and whatever you think you need more.
I like it. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on the program today. Folks, remember what Mike talked about today: hire for attitude, train for skill. And I'll tell you what, give me a fresh piece of clay that doesn't know anything about anything and let me mold them. I'll take that all day long. I'm Ted Jenkin, your host. Thanks for watching The Roadmap exclusively here on America's Small Business Network. We'll see y'all next week.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Ted Jenkin.